I understand what you're saying when you say that the children that are born in within this generation and previous generations, they're not necessarily immigrants because they were born within uh, South African territory. But the issue that I take with it is that while they have history and ties with the land itself, now that their ancestors arrived, uh, they don't have ties to the people. And I speak generally because I'm basing my um, assumptions on apartheid, where it was they were perfectly fine, you know, calling themselves South Africans, but they insulated themselves from the other tribes, whether it be Zulu, Xhosa, or etc. And then also additionally, the reason why I take issue with them currently being in South Africa is because they have always tried to insulate themselves from other Africans. For instance, you would have like I remember watching this YouTube video, and there was like a line straight down the middle of a South African or Afrikaans governed territory that mainly Boers lived in, and it was the land was plush, the houses were built up, um, they had trees and paved roads, and on the other side you have the South African side where you had the native population and it was run down and kind of just in terrible condition. And to me, they've always, yeah, they've had like patriotic ties to South African land, but it's more so to the land and to themselves, not so much true of the African population that they're surrounded. So much so that I believe that there's like a South African town to this day that it's mainly like white only. Whereas if you're black, you can do labor there, but you have to leave after you're done. They will not you cannot live there. They will not rent to you. You cannot buy a house there. It's like its own autonomous zone, so to speak.
Can
So
I
I feel like
can I push back here and say,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
aren't there aren't there people who advocate for ethnostates within Africa as well? I mean, some some of these guys are saying that's the whole goal for ethnostates.
I agree, and I like the idea of an ethno state, but I don't like it when you have a population that is coming from outside of Africa and then trying to set up their own ethno state within the continent that they aren't that they don't in my opinion they don't belong to. It's like no African. I don't care how uh, well off any African person is. They cannot go to Europe and set up an autonomous zone and deny other European access to
But they
their residential districts.
but they have in
There
France.
are there are ghettos
In
that
Brit
exist
Well, no, there's
in Britain,
straight up autonomous zones.
but I would argue that it's more so the ghettos that exist even in America. It's not so much that they're forcing white people out and not allowing them to stay. It's that they don't want to actually come and integrate and be in a situation. For instance, you aren't gonna see that many white people for those that can help it in the inner city ghettos of Chicago or even in Richmond because they don't want to live there because it's associated with high crime. So I understand what you're saying. Where there's like ghettos where there's majority black, but it's more so
But they're not
it's
even.
out of necessity.
It's not even so much the ghetto aspect. It's the aspect that the culture is different, where it's you have to wear Muslim clothes and you have to be Muslim within these enclaves of the greater city.
See what you're saying. You're talking about um, the Muslim communities that are making it into Europe. From
Mm-hmm.
my understanding, though, Europeans hate that, and they're complaining that the citizens aren't integrating and they're adopting they um, that they're destroying their, I guess, European sensibilities by uh, their approach to expressing their own cultural norms. So,
Sure, but
I,
that's literally what colonization is. Like this is that's the same thing Africans are complaining about, right?
yeah, yeah, but see, that's the thing. When you ask the question, would it be fair for Africans to return to Europe? If we're talking vice versa, then yes, because I'm not saying this to be one sided. I'm saying this, we can be honest here in saying that Africa is needed more than Europe. I mean, Europe needs Africa more than Africa needs Europe. For the prime example, if support, if the African countries under ECOWAS or whatever decided to cut France off entirely, France would become a third world country. This was admitted between France's own officials that they need, um, particularly the certain block of Western Africa, to continue to enjoy the liberties that they have now. If you cut that off from the French, they'd be ready to kill. They'd be ready to do anything necessary to maintain their hegemony. So I think I believe it should happen, but I also know that it probably won't happen because if all these Africans were to go back to their respective countries and Europeans were to go to to leave South Africa, then there would still be um, these proxy wars that are going on and assassinations because they need the mineral wealth of some of these African countries.
Mm.
And it's not so much that it's not so much that it's a race thing. It's more so that it's like you have Western Europeans that have pretty much looked out for each other's interests up until after World War II. They pretty much were like, look, we're not going to fight amongst ourselves anymore because it's limiting our capacity to subjugate other nations.
That was a,
So
I'd argue that was a little bit before World War II, and I mean the reason it wasn't really even Western Europe. It was more so the American Empire had with the Marshall Plan. Literally, it was we rebuilt Europe, Western Europe, just so that they wouldn't embrace communism.
yeah, that's a good point. And it was the fear. Yeah, that's a good point. But I think it's the consolidate.
We quite literally put boots on the ground in Western Germany, and like, and basically said, like, this is that communism does not pass this line. That was the Iron Curtain.
Yeah,
We rebuilt Europe just so that they would, just so they wouldn't have just they wouldn't even want to embrace the ideology.
yeah,
We could argue that it has been infiltrated and taken over. It's been subverted into, excuse me, all types of Western European societies. I think Italy's starting to push back, at least the North Italians,
yeah,
and I don't know, the British are pretty much insane. They're just insane
yeah,
cucks, to be honest with you.
yeah. I understand. I I mean, you have a good point. Um, I think more so, it was also because when they say communist versus capitalism or whatever, American patriotism. I know it's somewhat of a proxy too. Like um, communism was a convenient tool for Americans to use as a front because they were trying to checkmate Russia and Asia. They were particularly concerned about, what if all these territories in Asia somehow, they come together, and communism was that glue that could piece together, uh, Russia and China, and I believe even for a little while, Russia and China had a amicable relationship, uh, somewhat dissolved over the course of history. But I think it was the fear of the West wanting to maintain their foothold because you know it was important that Africa remained carved up between these colonial powers, and having a strong Asia, having a strong Russia was concerning because they wanted the power to be maintained within Western Europe. And the reason why I say that is because after World War II, they tried to get German commandos to fight against uh, Russians. They wanted it to happen. It never came to fruition, and there's no telling how different the world would be. But they did definitely try and get after World War II these German commandos to uh, essentially be a wedge between Russia. And I get it, it's at that point it's more so about keeping their power. Um, but I just feel like with the current situation, it's untenable. Like I even looked at the YouTube video of this French artist, or this not a French artist. I'm sorry. He was he worked in the museum, and he was showing African art, and he was being interviewed, and the person said, "Do you believe these artifacts belong back to the Africans?" And he said, "No, there's no, it's these are relics owned by France, and this is ours, and this is it." And it kind of opened up my mind to how they view the world. It doesn't matter what possessions that you have, or what resources you may have on your soil. They don't view it as yours. They don't view it as something belonging to you. They feel that it's theirs, and that's why I kind of like with the apartheid system, it Africans became second class citizens within their own territories. It was like that they are being treated like they didn't belong within their own homeland. That's the reason why my indignation has
Well,
carried over to the.
before we get back to the South, tie back into South Africa, I wanted to push back and say with the communism thing, it was more
Oh,
so.
my bad. Yeah.
I say it was more so a clash of ideologies between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was more so. I think both ideologies of free enterprise and communism had a fair chance of uniting the world, but I think both systems bastardized that their ideologies and were ultimately subverted and corrupted. Um,
Yeah.
and then when it comes to what France, I want to ask if you do you believe in like natural law, like the natural law of might makes right.
I believe that.
So Africa might be on the bottom, but if there comes a day that Africa is on top and they look towards Europe and it goes the Eiffel Tower,
Mhm.
is that French? Is this French? It's you see it here in Senegal. Do you think it should be returned to the French people? No, it is ours.